Welcome to the Blessings podcast today with Henri Nawrocki. Henry is here to join us for a great conversation, and I am going to ask him to let you all know what he's up to right now and who he is.
Yeah,
Henry.
thank you so much, Itzy, for this introduction and for letting me be here, share today about my life story with you. Yeah, my name's Henry, and I'm a spiritual mentor, advisor, and teacher. Been doing this work for the last 5 years. And right now, I find myself at a time in my life where really my focus is to bring that work that I do, which is a lot about deep presence work, how we can become really present with ourselves, how we can become more how we can reach this state of more embodied kind of feeling of calm and relaxation and ease in ourselves, and how we can live in the deepest alignment with our spiritual truth, not always with what our mind might be wanting, what our vision is, but really how can we live in deepest alignment with our spiritual truth and live the life that we've been called to live in a deeper way. So it's something super meaningful to my heart, and it's something I'm so passionate about, is to spread the word of really spiritual teachings and spiritual tools that are really grounding, balancing, harmonizing, creating deeper peace in ourselves. And I see a lot of kind of teachings out there that sometimes can be taken in a way that can be counterproductive, create more judgment, create more kind of resistance in ourselves. And my goal really is to help people really connect to themselves in such an authentic, compassionate, deeply meaningful way and embrace who they are today, even though that might not be fully where they want to be. Right. And that's where I am right now, really focusing on spreading that word, really focusing on doing my work and my service. I work mainly one-on-one with clients in my mentorship program, where I guide them through these transformational experiences and guide them into actually having an embodied, deeper embodied experience of inner peace and inner freedom in a relaxed nervous system. And yeah, that's somehow something that I've been really called to do in the last 5 years, always fine tuning and sharpening. And yeah, I'm really excited to see where it goes. And in my personal life, I really love just relaxing, going out in nature and connecting with people. I love people, all kinds of people, and just building connections and community and relationships. And for me, it's always a desire to meet everyone where they're at, meaning what they're passionate about, what they find meaning in, and really create these connection points with people, be able to, yeah, build genuinely loving, supportive connections and relationships. And that's pretty much all that I feel called to share right now. Yeah. About me right now.
I love it. It's so important and just increasing the level of authenticity in the world and the ability to really go in and know yourself. And I love the self acceptance aspects also. It's very important. So I usually find that people who are in the healing modalities
Yeah.
have an interesting journey that has brought them to that point. So let's
Sure.
go back to the very beginning
Yeah.
when Henry was born.
Mhm.
Can you talk to us a little bit about where you were born and your very early life?
Yeah. It's hard for me to fully remember my very early life. Truly, I think my memories start kicking in more when I was in school or when I was 4 or 5 years old. But I was born in Germany, actually. And now I live in the US, but I was born in Germany, lived in Germany for a good chunk of my life. And I was born in a little town called Bandsberg, which is close to a bigger town called Cologne, which is the fourth biggest city in Germany. And my birth was, I think it was not an easy birth. I think it was C-section. So it was like a not the easiest birth. And I think as a very young kind of baby or infant or my early years, I think there was this deep kind of feeling maybe of maybe unsafety or not feeling fully safe in the world. Always from the stories that my mom shared with me, that I was always very attached in some way to her, wanting closeness, just feeling unsafe and very, yeah, very unsafe in my being and my body. And so that's always something that I've heard, and it's interesting.
Do you actually remember feeling that way?
I really don't. I don't have so much actual memory of it, but when I tune into it on an intuitive level, I can sense that I think that I was very afraid and feeling unsafe. And I can remember more when it starts like school and being 5, 7 years old. And I can definitely relate to that feeling of feeling afraid and in myself, having a hard time to connect with the world in different ways. Not in all ways, some ways. And yeah, that's all that comes to me from my very early years.
I think it's interesting to think
Yeah.
about the difference between the things we actually remember in our early life and what are the stories that people have told us about those times.
Sure.
So, can you think back and touch upon what you might find as your earliest memory?
Mhm. Yeah. I think the earliest memory that kind of comes to me as like a snapshot is actually an accident that I had. I don't know how old I was, maybe two, three, four. And I was carried down the stairs and whoever was carrying me fell down the stairs. And it was like an accident. I don't think I got particularly hurt, but somehow it's strange, right? It's the
Mhm.
kind of earliest kind of memory that has sometimes come to me in different seeings and different kind of tuning into myself. Yeah. So not particularly special or fun memory, but yeah, it's the authentic memory that comes to me.
Yeah, and I think it's significant. You probably be able to put some pieces together immediately. The thoughts of lack of safety come to mind.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, for
Interesting.
sure. It is very interesting. I think it was very, I must have definitely left some trauma in me in some capacity, some form. What form, who knows? But it definitely probably didn't go unscarred from that in different ways.
No, for sure. So, you said that once you start to have more active memories, you
Yeah.
were like 5, 6, so entering like kindergarten into the
Yeah.
early elementary years.
Kindergarten, I can start remember some tiny things, just what the kindergarten looked like and different memories there. And yeah, I can remember a little bit from that.
What would be a word you'd use to describe yourself at that age?
I think when I started to be in kindergarten, I think when I started, there was definitely also this feeling of anxiety and very shy, very not wanting to leave mommy, not wanting to go into the world. So I think that was a little bit of an anxiety there. But I think once I started settling there, I still remember having two friends that we called each other, or we were called the Three Musketeers, which is funny. But I think what started to arise in me was more this maybe adventurous, playful side of me, exploring, playing, imagining different scenarios of who you are. I think sometimes we would imagine we're pirates or something like that. You start to tap into that childhood kind of imaginary self. I think I started to have moments of experience in my childhood where I started to feel playful in different ways. So that was fun.
So you remember yourself feeling playful. You could really connect to that feeling of playfulness.
Yeah, it's not something that I so somatically feel right now in my body so deeply, but I definitely remember I had these two friends and we were just like wild. That would run around. Yeah, just do catch. I don't know, whatever that game is when you get caught and someone needs to tap you and running around and being wild. And I definitely remember some aspects of that. So that's nice to kind of connect to that as present.
Yes, I love that. A playfulness. Really cool. And so what did you think about school once you got used to it? Were you a good student?
I think school is very intense for me looking back now. I think it was a sense of pressure that came with it for me in a sense of feeling in Germany, the first 2 years, you don't get graded, but then starting in year three, you actually get graded on your work. And those grades starts to determine whether you will be advancing to a kind of a middle school that's like a higher quality. There's like different sections based
Yeah.
on the quality of your short, similar here in the United States. And so I remember it being quite intense. I remember this memory of, I was always like a good student. I wasn't like one of like the absolute best, but I would say I was probably in the top 30% in elementary school or top 25 or something like that. And I was really good at, which was interesting to remember, I was really good at writing and reading. I remember that whenever it was about writing, I would always get A's and even A stars. And I would always be one of the best at writing, even like really difficult words that other people had a really hard time. Or they would get all these spelling mistakes, but I would always just be really good at that. Math was something in my early years that I think fell a little bit hard for me. Like I was still good, but I think I wasn't as good as like the reading and the writing part. I don't know what it was. And I remember going back to the pressure, remember having that one time where I think I got like a D or something like that. Just not a good grade. And
Mm.
I think that was like shock to my system. And I can still remember that fear of maybe like sharing that with my parents, bringing that grade home, that feeling of maybe really disappointing them or really being not a good child or doing something wrong. So looking back at that now, I think there were some intense experiences in elementary school filled with other joyful experiences. I remember we would used to play a lot on the playground. I had a little group of friends, and there was this one time that sticks out to me where we were playing this game. I just shared it with you, where you need to catch people, and they're the people that kind of catch the
Tag.
people that
Is it
run
just tag?
tag.
I think we call it tag.
Tag, yes. But I think it starts out with one guy being the person that tags, and then as
Mhm.
you tag people, more people become the tagging people. As
Yeah.
you get, you go into that side of the team. And I remember vividly that there was this one time where somehow I was so miraculously running and finding loopholes, because what you had to do is you had to find your way back to the base where you could then free the people that got tagged already.
Yes. Okay.
Right? You
Yeah,
remember that?
sort you're
Yeah.
kind of bringing it back for me. I'd forgotten about
Yeah,
that
it's
game.
alive right now. And I remember I had this vivid experience of doing the impossible in a way, of finding loopholes and being able to do it, which was, I think in that moment, it gave me this feeling of, I guess, just being a hero or doing something like
Right.
doing the impossible. And I
Mhm.
think back then it felt so special to me, and it felt special, but obviously too, being witnessed in that and being seen in that, and other people like, "Oh, how did you do that?" But I think it connected,
Invincibility.
yeah, that definitely. But I think it connected me also to a part of my soul, which is that part of doing the impossible in a way,
That
going
it's
through hell.
possible. It's a part of you to be able
Yeah,
to do that.
exactly. Yeah.
Very
So
interesting.
funny that memory just came up. But yeah, I remember that. And
Yes.
what else is there from elementary? That's pretty much it. I remember playing a lot of kind of sports and soccer, and we would have these games between the two different classes. There was some tension there sometimes, and some little fights and stuff like that. But I was always a little bit more reserved, always kind of shy away from conflict. Those are the key elements that I remember.
That's interesting. Just want to mention that in the United States, we do not have that type of a tracked system necessarily, where early on your grades would determine where you're going to go later.
Oh, yeah,
That
that's
starts a little bit later, I think, where it's more choice driven. But it's interesting that you felt the pressure of that as a small child, that you understood that your grades were connected to your future, like in the
yeah.
immediate future.
For sure. Yeah, it is a lot of pressure in a way, because your parents maybe have the expectations, and you come people that come more from a household. My parents were in a household that was, I would say, pretty solid, not extremely wealthy, but more like upper class and upper middle class. And I think when you come from more those kind of households, you're more expected somehow to make it to highest school after. It's almost like an expectation and the awareness of yourself. And so it definitely did come with some pressure. And I remember that's what I remember. And I think it's something that has brought itself into my life today as an adult. Still, that is something that have healed in many ways, but still something I'm working through, the sense of putting a lot of pressure on myself to do well, to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Definitely is still there in different ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Were there other siblings in your family?
Yes, I had two brothers. Actually, now I have three brothers, because my dad got another child later in life. But those were, I had one sibling, but that was my main sibling. And I had one step sibling, which we shared our mom. On the mom's side, we had the same mom, but a different dad. And then I had a brother that came from both my mom and dad. But we always had the same, we were real brothers. We didn't like that sense of, you're my stepbrother or something like that. But so I had two brothers in that sense.
And how was your family life? Were you like a close family?
It's very interesting. I definitely feel that there were connective parts of my family, and then very disconnective or dysfunctional aspects of it as well. And I think when I grew up, this memory, I always felt like my parents were really like amazing and the most amazing
Mhm.
parents. I think when sometimes when we're children, we kind of glorify our parents, we see them as these like big beings that take care of us. And we can't imagine that they could do something quote unquote wrong, or could do something that maybe isn't so much in integrity with their highest truths on a deeper level. We always, I still vividly remember just always looking at my dad and feeling so proud of my dad or something like that. And I remember being at other families of my friends and seeing their moms and somehow feeling happy that I had my mom. And so there were moments of that where I actually felt like I had a really good family life and family. And that definitely was true to a good extent. But I think as I grew up and I reflected on different things in my childhood, which actually I'm still doing in different ways, I realized that there where a lot of things were dysfunctional and traumatizing to me in different ways, different needs that simply weren't met that I really needed. So I think I had definitely a good childhood and good moments, but I think there are definitely a lot of scars left from growing up for sure,
Yeah.
which we all do in different ways. I'm sure you hear it on this podcast all the time. Everyone has their own challenging stories. Their
Yes,
things.
they do. I'm finding that everyone has their experiences that have touched them in ways that are difficult to work through as they get older.
Yeah.
And those come in varying degrees.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't think that we can judge the severity or the level of those experiences at all because they're important to us. And as you got older then in the middle school years.
So in Germany, we don't actually have a high school. The middle school and high school is one same thing. So
Oh,
it goes from grade six, no, sorry, grade five to grade 13. So it's like
oh,
a big school with 8 years of stretching 8 years of people. I think here in the US, it's like middle school and then high school 4 years.
usually, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. And then, yeah, so I made it to the school that was of the highest caliber and I got accepted to school. And I think the few years that I had from fifth grade to I think it was eighth grade or maybe early eighth grade, late seventh grade, I went to that school. And after that, actually, we can get to that in a little bit. But my mom, my brother, and I, we moved to Australia. My mom always had this big dream to somehow at some point to move out and go to Australia. It was like an amazing place. And so I actually was only there for 3 years, I think maybe two and a half. And looking back at it now, think there were definitely aspects that I enjoyed, but I think it was very pressure filled for me. I had a very hard time. Wasn't actually doing so well at school. I was getting by more in the middle of the tier, not getting the greatest grades. And looking back at it now, it was a challenging time. Honestly, it was a challenging time. I think in elementary, things were in many ways, I think I had some inner kind of successes and the time was good in different ways. And I had a good bunch of friends. And in high school, or sorry, in that kind of school, I had a very hard time, especially around the theme of kind of being bullied in different ways. And looking back at it now and I've reflected on it, it was a very, very challenging time that really impacted me, I think, in different ways. So it's
Yeah.
very tough because I remember I was part of this friends group and I had friends and I was part of like a group, but there was this one person that was really a friend, but also my nemesis in a
A
way.
frenemy.
Friend envy, you could say. Yeah, like we're friends on a surface level, but friends don't treat each other like he treated me, unfortunately. And I think he really bullied me in different ways that really impacted me moving forward. And I think there was this confusion in me that, but like sometimes we're friends and we're connected and we'll go to his house and we connect. And then other times when we're in the group or when we're alone or something, then I would kind of get bullied in different ways, which is very, very hard for me to understand. And I think I still carry some or have carried some of that trauma that came from that kind of feeling of betrayal,
Yeah.
opening your heart to someone and you're making friends with someone and being treated in that way. And I remember that person was like, in some way, he was the wealthiest kid in the school. He was very wealthy. His parents were very wealthy. And everyone, he was a little bit of a leader at some point. Like everyone just always would go to his house because he had to make his house. And I think people saw him a little bit as a leader. And what was really sad to me. I remember this one moment where I think that the bullying was around the theme of being gay in a way. And I'm a straight man, but I always had this more, I guess, sensitivity, this kind of like feminine energy in different
Yeah.
ways that boys maybe don't have. So that was like a bad thing, I guess. When as a child and when you're in school, you're just so not mature. You hear different things and you pick them up, and then that's somehow like a shameful thing. And that was the theme of the bullying, which was somehow I was always told by this guy, "You're gay," which he didn't even know. And it was funny too. I had one of the first kind of girlfriends in the class, and because I think there was also something about my sensitivity was appreciated by different people, girls, or even some of the guys. But that was very painful for me to be told something that I didn't fully identify with. And I remember that one time, I haven't really ever spoken about this so much. So it's an interesting thing to speak about. But there was this one time when, again, it was happening. He was telling me that I was gay and I was saying, no, I'm not gay, whatever. And then I would ask, because I knew like some of my other friends would in that group would always tell me, no, it's not true. I understand. But then when they're in the group setting, sometimes they would agree with me, kind of
Ah,
taking that mob mentality. And so I
yes.
remember that one time being so traumatized, like he's telling me that, and I was really in a state of distress. And I would go to my other friend, and no, and he would go to my other friends and ask them, Henry's gay, right? And they were all like, yeah. And even though to me, they would say, no, Henry, it's not true. And I think that was a shocking moment for me. I still remember that one time when everyone felt like betrayed me or turned against me. I remember running to the bathroom and crying and being in a state of distress, like really deeply not knowing how to handle the situation. It was very intense for me. And I think on some level, then I just suppressed it and moved forward. And I was still in that friends group and wanted to be included. And what was interesting too, what I reflected on that one guy that bullied me, he always also felt drawn to me because of my sensitivity. I feel like
Mm.
often the people that get bullied is something I reflected on, they often actually create this safe space for other people or children then to let out their pain that they have endured from, whether it's their siblings or their parents in different ways. And I think I had more of that receptive, sensitive energy. And I think on some level, he could feel safe with me. And I think he felt safe to let his pain out on me in some way, to
Yeah.
put me down in order for him to feel better then because he was feeling not good inside. Obviously, no one would do that when they're feeling confident and great in themselves. But I remember that one time when his parents would go out of town and he needed somewhere to sleep, which was a new experience for him. And he really wanted to sleep at my place. He felt safest there. And I kept saying, no,
Mm.
I don't want that because it was like, even though we were still friends, obviously it hurt me all the time what he did. And I never really communicated. And I think I was suppressed in my communication to create a boundary. And so the pleasing, good person that I was at some point, I gave in and was like, okay, you can sleep at my place. And he slept over but I wanted us to sleep in separate rooms. And just looking back, it was a strange experience. And I wish now I had the strength back then to
Mm.
really create deeper boundaries. But I think because in my earlier childhood and my upbringing, I think it was really hard for me to speak up. And maybe moments I had anger or something wasn't okay. And I would speak it out or I would have a tantrum. And maybe that was suppressed in some way. And so it was really difficult for me almost impossible to create a boundary. I almost became this pleasing person to this guy of everything's okay, even though deep down it was not okay. I was really sad, really hurt. And I wish I had the confidence in some way back then to create a boundary right away and say, hey, this is not how you treat me. This is not how you talk to me. I don't really want to have anything to do with you. Now in my adult life, even though boundaries are still challenging for me, I would be able, if I could feel pain over and over again and the harm, I'd be able to do that. I've done that in my work settings in different ways. And so that's a long story, but that was
Mm.
really a difficult time for me. I
Yeah.
think that shaped me in different ways. And yeah,
That's so
challenge.
difficult.
Yeah,
I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's really important because, first of all, when you're a child, to establish that sort of boundary, you risk losing all your friends.
that's right.
And that's why you stay in that group. I think today we could see that, and I just learned this myself, that bully was exhibiting typical narcissistic behaviors. And then what he did with the other friends actually has a name. When a narcissist does that with their group against someone in the group, it's called the rallying the flying monkeys, like in the Wizard of Oz. And those people, your friends, the external people in the group, were the flying monkeys. And they will do whatever the narcissist says they should do to turn against someone else in the group. Because if he's the wealthiest kid, if he's the kid with the charisma and all the friends, everybody wants to be, they don't want to get excluded from that group either.
Sure.
That's what was
Yeah.
happening. And it's not
True.
even, it's so interesting that children, it's just striking me that this is what happens with children. And they have no understanding of what's going on, like
Yeah.
psychologically.
For sure. Absolutely.
And
And
you're powerless.
you are. And I think it's good to know that it's good to be aware that it was no one's fault in that way. It wasn't the fault of people that didn't have any other chance than to follow along. And on a deeper spiritual level, there's not at fault in that child because he was so hurt. He was so hurt. And he had to find some kind of way to let his pain out and to have someone maybe else feel so much pain that he endured as a child from whether it's his
Yeah.
parents or his siblings or whatever it is. And so it took me some while and to forgive, I guess, because it impacted me so deeply and it wasn't right. It wasn't okay. It should have never happened. And I think if I would meet that individual now, which I don't think I ever will, I don't think I would be particularly excited to speak to that person or pretend that are fine. If anything, I would probably say how not okay it was, just to create energy and that understanding. But I think on some level, I'm not like blaming him or anyone in some way, because as a child, we're emotionally mature. We don't understand process, how to do things. We do our best that we can in order to survive. It's a survival instinct.
Yes.
So to hurt another in that deep way. But yeah, it was very, and I agree with you what you shared, this kind of flying monkey and rallying. And yeah, so that was a very
Interesting.
difficult time. And then my mom, we went to Australia and for a year. And that was a really important pivotal shift for me, I think, because I I really found myself in different ways there. I had friends and connections, and I wasn't bullied in that way. And there was a sense of becoming more alive in myself. And it was in that year that I was there. So it was a very magical time. I remember we'd go to the beach a lot. I would do surfing and different things. So it was a very fun aspects of it. I think what was challenging for me was that my dad was staying home because he had his own business and he couldn't just go over, drop everything. So we only actually saw him, I think, once or twice. He visited us once or twice in a year. So we had very little contact to him. And I think that was not easy for me in some way, and I think my parents were in a difficult time in their own relationship at that time. And I don't know all the details, but it was a very big shift. It's not something that every family does. I think my mom always had a little bit of this spirit, this adventurous spirit and going for things. Yeah, at one point she just planned it and figured it all out. And she took my little brother and me there and we lived there for a year. And it was a very, looking back at it now, I'm happy that we did that because it showed me new aspects of myself and life in new different ways. And I think it was good to have a cut from that other school that obviously was a very toxic environment for
Oh,
me.
yeah.
But it is interesting how that notion of just suddenly ripping your life away and having your kids and children not see their dad for a particular long period of time.
Yeah.
I don't know the particular impact that had on me, but I think sometimes I reflect on that and I was like, was that the right thing to do? My mom in some way, was that considering all the different elements? And I'm grateful for the time because it really did give me different positive experiences. And I remember when we left to go back to Germany, because we couldn't stay somehow with my dad's work, there was a plan of maybe staying there forever, but it didn't work out. I remember we had this party with friends and I would I had to say goodbye to them. And it was such an emotional experience. There was so much grief and sadness because there was such deep connections built, which was
Yeah.
beautiful in a way. It showed me that I really felt safe with different people and appreciated. And the fact that everyone also cried, having me gone, showed me that I was appreciated. So yeah, that was an interesting time for sure.
What was your age then?
14, I think, 13, 14, that kind of range.
Interesting. I think that what strikes me is what happens to a lot of kids when they're bullied, they don't have any way out. They can't change schools. They're not able to escape. And they might live the rest of their experience in school having to endure that. You got out.
I
That's amazing.
got
That
enough
is
for that.
wonderful. But at the same time, there was obviously something going on where your mom needed to experience something away from the life with your dad, and she wanted this adventure, which I could totally relate to that. It's just really interesting. That's a very interesting experience, and it's nice that
Yeah.
you could frame it in the positive, although being away from your dad was difficult.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what was interesting too, it wasn't like that whole move was initiated because there was awareness of bullying going on. And I
Yeah.
think that's something I want to talk about too. I think a lot of children, they really suffer in silence because their parents don't really create safe spaces to check in with their children, to really be attuned because they go through their own stress in life. My parents always went through a lot of stress because my dad had his own business and my mom helped with that for a long time. And that was always the culture of our family: stress. Everything's stressful, everything hard. And I think my parents went through a lot of stress, always a lot of working, a lot of stress, overworking in order to provide for the family, which has a good intention, but there was just a lot of stress. And I think in that stressful environment, I think that the needed attunement to the child or the children to really see what's going on in their world, to understand their world, is something that I think looking back, I really needed. And I didn't have that space. I didn't feel safe to share my vulnerable experience. It's not an experience you feel really happy to share. Hey, mom, I'm being bullied. There's a sense of shame in that, maybe, or some way. But I think that's such a deep responsibility now for parents, is to really create spaces where they continuously check in with their child to ask them how they're feeling, how's their world going, what's going on. So the child can feel safe enough to open up about things like that. And those things can be processed and healed, and then resolution can be found. And I never feel like looking back, I really had that space. My dad was very absent from my life, and because he was always working and he was very neglectful in different ways. And my mom, even though she was there were also a lot of different codependent dynamics and different ways that was very not so healthy looking back now. And I think that really was impacted me. Looking back is like, why was no one there for me? And I
Mm.
think sometimes I look back and I think I suppressed a lot of my childhood just because it was so painful in my teenage life. But looking back now, I felt like invisible in some way. No one ever really cared to understand what was going on inside me. And I was such a sensitive, really had a high level of sensitivity. And I was a little bit chaotic as well with that sensitivity. And I remember one of my elementary teachers, she called me the chaotic professor or the chaotic genius. Something like she could feel that I was very intelligent, a genius in a way, but so chaotic. And I was always a little bit all over the place because I think I was always trying to process different things. Everything impacted me on such a deep level, my environment. I think when you don't have really safe containers and spaces to process everything, you build your own mechanisms. And I think one of my mechanisms was to make sense of things and to be in my mind and very internal, very in myself to make sense of everything. So that's something I want to speak about. And I'm sure many people maybe watching this can relate to that these safe spaces, these really safe spaces not being created for you as a child to really process and everything kind of being stuffed down. And I
Mm.
think somehow there was this element, my dynamic with my parents, this element of conformity, this element of my own individuality and sovereignty wasn't nurtured. No one was really nurturing my skills or was nurturing, maybe not in all ways, but was nurturing like my healthy sovereignty of who's Henry and let's get to know him and what does Henry want? What's important to Henry? And I think there was this element of, and I don't even have so many memories, but I think on some level I was suppressed in my own truth, in my voice, in what I wanted. And I just conformed to just like what was expected of me. And I kind of lost, I think, a part of myself. I was just conforming always
Mm.
to how I should be in order to receive the positive validation, attention that a part of me yearned for and needed. And I think Gabor, I don't know if you've ever heard of Gabor, but he talks about how as children, we have the need for authenticity of being ourselves, but the need for love and the need for healthy or the need for being loved unconditionally is bigger than that. And so when our parents can't somehow create space for all of ourselves, the whole range, our anger, our emotion, the realness of who we are, if they don't have
Right.
their own emotional capacity to hold space for that, then they often subconsciously suppress our authenticity. And then we have still that need for love. And so we drop our authenticity because being loved is a survival need,
Yeah.
need that acceptance. And so we can't just like rebel and be our authentic self and say, okay, I'm leaving this home because it's dysfunctional. We're like, what, 9 years old? I think some kids I know from different people and my partner in different ways, some kids put up more of a fight to the emotional abuse of their parents, the emotional neglect. They fight. This isn't right. This is how it should be treated. They fight. And I think that fight never was alive in me. I can't remember. I think from very early on, I just realized to be safe, I needed to conform. And that was just like, I think any tantrums I had, different tantrums, were never really held space for in a healthy way. Hey, I'm sorry you feel this way. I'm wanting to understand why you feel this. Why are you feeling this? I'm here for you. I love you. It was more like my parents were too stressed out to deal with my emotion.
Mm.
Oh, and yeah, so it's very interesting. There's definitely a lot of things that I now see of what happened, the different challenges that the dysfunctional dynamics. And it's so sad sometimes to a part of me and the ways it had impact.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I think it's interesting that we don't place as a global humanity more emphasis on those psychological needs of children, and there's no requirements for parents at all. And I don't think we need to have mandatory parenting programs. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but there should be more access for parents to know the importance of these things and the impact so we don't have to deal with these things
Yeah.
as much when we get older.
Huge at. And I'm glad because I see more and more kind of accounts and different people speaking about conscious parenting. And
Yeah.
on Instagram, I've seen that and giving examples of practical examples of how it would look like in different situations, how to actually treat your child, which is so opposite of what I experienced. It's just so funny. Like it's something so foreign to me, but I do think there's a shift of more awareness coming in that regard,
I
which I'm
agree. There is. I think so. And if people have access to that information and they're open to it, it's wonderful because then it'll create another generation of people who hopefully will grow up with more healthy
absolutely,
psyches,
that really helps me.
So
Like,
interesting.
yeah.
So then when you came back from Australia, you were in full-blown teen years.
I was, yeah. This is where things started to get interesting. So because I now was fluent in English and my dad was always he was very intellectual, very intelligent in different ways. We come from like an academic kind of lineage. And so he wanted me to go to a private school now, English speaking school, not go back to high school. And to be honest, that was nice for me because I didn't want to go. I had very bad experiences
Yeah.
with that culture. So I didn't want to go back. And so I welcomed that opportunity to go to a different school, English speaking. And I think this was where an interesting shift happened for me. I was not good at school. I was not particularly good. I was always like average. And when I went to the school, somehow I started to become a top student, which was very interesting for me. And it was such a refreshing and somehow really nice experience for me because I felt like I had an environment now that somehow with the teachers, different teachers I really bonded with and vibed with. And I think the standard sometimes, the intensity is maybe it's still intense, but I think there can be a little bit more of a less intensity, at least for me in that experience than going back to high school and the grades and intensity there. It almost felt like there was more of a safe space to flourish where before with a lot of pressure and I almost like, and I had those beginning experiences of getting good grades and somehow I guess it opened up this knowing in me that I am smart and I am a good learner and somehow created this confidence. And then I did really well in school for the next years and which was really not that has brought me where I am today, being good at school, but I think it was nice for me and it gave me a confidence in different ways to suddenly be skilled at different things and good at things. So,
It reminds me of the story you told on the playground when you felt invincible in tag.
yeah.
It had a reconnection to that sense of power.
Yeah, totally. In a certain way, that's true. Yeah. And so I made new friends and I actually built some really good friendships there. And I had one friend that we're not so connected anymore, unfortunately. But I think I really started to really have a really deep friendship and deep friendships, feeling like my uniqueness, which is always a little bit like this kind of quirky side of me, fun, quirky, goofy sometimes in different ways. And I think different aspects of my personality got to be nurtured and I got to be met and received. And so I think in different ways, I had a good time at that school. But there was a time then in 2011, I think it was, when my parents were going through a lot of stress and they actually decided to separate, to divorce. And then that was right around the time when school started to be like, would go into the last 2 years of school, which are the most important, which determines if you're going to get to good college and stuff like that. So it's the most intense. And so I had this simultaneous experience of my parents just got separated, which is, I think I suppressed that experience, but I think it was very traumatic for me, very difficult. At the same time, years of 2011, 2012, a lot of things happened that led to a lot of impacts for me. So my parents separated. School was more stressful than ever in the sense of really important for the rest of your life, so to say, that pressure. And then in 2012, my dad got some really bad news business-wise. He owed like a lot of money. So we were in big debts as well. And that was something that suddenly came out of nowhere. And there was this whole story. Someone was like extorting him or different things. So it was very deep things. And even in that experience, we had to change our names, block this person that was really extorting my dad financially because he even threatened his children, like us,
Wow.
which was back then, it was all very strange. And what the hell's going on here? Almost like a thriller, psychological thriller movie or something.
Yeah.
But I realized that really impacted me. And I think I suppressed it all. I moved on, but it was all building up inside of me like a pressure cooker. And then in
So you
2012,
did you have to like change your name and
no, not
or
change
okay,
name, but I think it was more like blocking this person
just
on
okay.
Facebook.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Okay.
it was more like that thing.
Okay.
And then, yeah, so all these different challenges started to build up. And my dad and mom were separated. And at some point in 2011, I moved over to my dad's place because all my good friends were living in that area of the city. Oh, and what else happened? My dad got a new girlfriend who was very toxic in different ways, very unstable psychologically. And I remember there were different things where my dad would have like fights and that I had to be present with and witness, and in different ways that his girlfriend blamed me or something or what's happening with them. It's very crazy. And I think it was a lot for me to handle, to deal with all at once. And
Yeah.
then while having that school pressure, now I was in this very high academic program, which is very kind of rigorous and intense. And there was a lot of pressure doing well. And I had this more and more pressure build up in me, more and more trauma, more and more pain that I just somehow couldn't handle. And so in 2012, I think it was February or something, I had a psychological breakdown or a psychosis actually. And which was this bizarre experience where suddenly a lot goes into it, but basically I would start thinking, seeing things that weren't actually fully happening. And I was perceiving a reality that wasn't actually happening. And I was hallucinating in a way. And I was imagining potentials or realities that weren't actually occurring. And and it all started with not being able to sleep. I had this sleep insomnia where I would literally like 2, 3 days, I would maybe get 1 hour of sleep. Like I couldn't sleep, like no matter what. And my mind started becoming very strange, or it's like I would read something in a book and then I would forget what I just read. And I would read in a book, I forget what I just read. And I read in a book, I forget. And I would keep going the same sentence, like maybe, I don't know, for like 20 minutes or something like that. And I was really not okay. There started to be all these symptoms, and my parents did their best to help me sleep because obviously they were aware that something was off and I couldn't sleep. And there was a lot of anxiety around that for me, not being able to sleep. And yeah, at some point, I think there was just too much happening. And it just resulted in this psychological psychosis kind of breakdown for me, unfortunately. And it was the biggest event of my life that really changed everything, because after that really deep experiences, I think it was the beginning of my spiritual awakening, was the beginning of
Mm.
my path to becoming interested in something bigger than this, because I felt like after this breakdown, and I was in a psychic institute for 2 months, and which was very challenging, but it wasn't also not all bad. There were very supportive people there. I actually had some good experiences there too, even fun experiences, but it was still I started to I need to go on medication, different pills to help my brain chemistry work differently. And in the beginning, it was very unclear what was happening to me, psychosis, and then people were saying different mental illnesses, stuff like that. And at some point, I got better in that time there. I think after 2, 3 months, I could go back home again. But life was very different now, because I was told by the teachers there. I went to this school, and I had to drop out of school for that time. I went to this kind of school that was supporting people that were going through psychological challenges. And I was told that I was never going to be the same. It was even what was emphasized a lot by the doctors was like, you're never going to be the same. And it's highly likely that you're going to get another episode like this sometimes later in life. And you might always live with that. It was very scary for me, this fear, this anxiety of something like this might happen again. And I might break down again like that. And so the focused intention after getting out of it was like low stress, not stressful for me. So I didn't do that highly academic school program anymore. I did the normal one. That was still great. Could still go to good colleges with that, but it was a little bit less stressful. So I repeated the year. So I went to lower grade because I had to skip out so much. Yeah. Anything you want to elaborate there? Because I know it's
Yeah. Can you describe what the episodes give us a story from what was happening during one of the episodes?
Yeah, it was very intense. So just viewer discretion. But yeah, I remember that one day where my mom brought me to the psychic institute, I guess you call it, or I was having hallucinations that I was being that person that my dad had previously had financial problems with and that had threatened us. All of that started to play into my narrative. And
Okay.
I started to have this narrative, I'm being followed and
Okay.
this person was trying to kill me or something like that, and I had that one moment I remember still where I was having a really intense experience and I wasn't feeling safe, and I was feeling like people were after me, and I drank water and suddenly I felt like water was poisoned. And I was like, Mom, like they poisoned the water. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And I was like, what are we going to do? And then she realized something was really like not right with me. And so she drove me there to this institute, and on the way, I felt like cars were following us. And I literally thought like people were after me to kill me.
Mhm.
I was afraid for my life. That was very real for me. And then we went to that institute and the door was, it took a while for the door to open. I was remembering, it's like, oh my God, mom, they're going to come. And obviously it was intense for my mom as well to experience. I don't think she was able to regulate me or fully be there to calm me. It was very intense for her as well, of course. But then I went into this institute. I had to talk with this doctor, and I still remember so vividly. This doctor like was part of this group that was wanting to kill me. And I remember he gave me like this apple juice thing or something I had to drink, and I was like, I don't want to drink this. This is poison. Like, you're trying to kill me. I had to be by myself for a while. My mom talked to this doctor, and I had to be out of the room. And it was the most intense experience because I literally thought they were going to kill me. And my mom didn't understand. I kept telling her, Mom, they're going to kill me. Mom, you can't leave. You can't leave. They're going to kill me. Please get me out of here. But obviously my mom knew something else was happening. But it was so real. It was real in my experience and my
Yeah.
perception. All very real, very real. And then because I was going through this thing, and I think the doctor described I'm going through psychosis or psychotic break or something like that. So I had to stay there for a night in some way. And I still remember this so vividly that my mom said she needs to go. And I was literally feeling like, if you're going to go, I'm going to die. They're going to kill me. And you're not seeing it. And that's bringing up some emotion for me for sure. I remember this moment of like, literally like screaming for her, you can't leave, you can't leave. She was like, I'm sorry. She left. And I think that was such a deep wound that I think maybe I probably experienced in my earlier childhood, this feeling of literally being abandoned, and not abandoned, just abandoned, but abandoned to die, literally abandoned, left to die some way. And so they put me into this room, locked the door, and I had to lie on this bed. The bed had like these things and these straps on them
Yeah.
where like they have very bad cases with people that maybe want to end their life or something. They strap them there so they can't do anything. But they didn't strap me. They just like locked me in there. I don't know if they even locked me, but this was my little room. And I was going in my mind like, oh my God, they're going to kill me. When are they going to? And so I had to sit there. I had to lie there and I couldn't sleep the whole night. Like I was, yeah. And then, yeah, it was a really challenging few months. And I think the first 2 weeks were very intense where I remember I would keep forgetting things. I would do something, I would keep forgetting it. And my thoughts were very like not linear and in sync. It was just that thought and then this thought and this. And it was all like very disconnected. And like suddenly, and it was very, I can't even recall everything. It was a very strange experience suddenly for me. And
You had an awareness of this thinking. What was your awareness when you were going through it?
I don't know. It's strange. It's not like I had a conscious awareness, like
Yeah.
I had an awareness that something was weird and
Yeah.
something right, but it was just happening. I
Yeah.
was just couldn't get out of it. It was just, I remember like playing in the beginning, like sometimes playing table tennis with this like guard guy that I enjoyed. And I remember I would play and then suddenly I would zone out in my mind and like the ball would come and I would just be, and then I would be back. It was almost like I kept zoning out to some other reality where I was completely disconnected from the connection to what was actually happening. It was like very strange. And so it was a very difficult time, and I got a really good support there. Fortunately, they were very caring, many people there and very supportive. I definitely think there are worse cases like in America, I've heard where you go into these quote unquote asylums, you're treated very badly and poorly. I'm fortunate to say that I was treated pretty well. Like I was actually cared about and nurtured and supported through that.
Mhm.
And I built some little bonds with some of the guards that really, I think, enjoyed my energy because there was also parts of me that started to become my personality and different parts of my confidence that started to come alive there. But it was a very pivotal time. And after that, having been told my life will never be the same and different things and having to
Mm.
take medicine and medication, I think what opened up for me was this desire, the seeking to know the truth, the seeking to know what is life really about. This can't be it. Like realizing how unhappy I've been and how unfulfilled and how disconnected. There was the seeking of, I want to know, I want to do, to remember this desire. I want to, anything I can do to become happy. Just want to know. And so I started doing research and different things. And I came upon the book from Eckhart Tolle. I'm sure Eckhart Tolle, right? And
Yes.
Hour of Now, which was one of the
Yes.
which was one of the books that really impacted me so deeply. It was all talking about the present moment and that in our thoughts and our past and future, we can never really be happy. It's such a deep experience for me. Somehow I felt such truth such resonance with that. Like, this is true. Like, I'm always thinking about the past. I'm always thinking about the future. I'm always in my mind. I'm not really happy. So it inspired me and it got me into meditation. I started to meditate every night for 10, 15 minutes. And I remember that one time, I don't know when it was, maybe 2013 or something. I meditated at night always. And I had this out of body experience where I was suddenly almost like out of my body. And all I could feel myself to be was this brimming awareness, but it was almost like taking like a universal rather than being myself. It was like, I was like the universe or something like that. I was just this like big field of complete, utter calm and stillness. And I couldn't really believe what was going on, but it was really powerful for me. And it showed me that through meditation, we can go into some very deep states. And so meditation became a big part of my life. And so that happened. Any more questions you have about all of that before we continue?
Yeah. How did you finally turn it around or begin to turn it around?
I just think that as I was there with the medication and it helped me and I just became better. I just became myself again in different ways. And then I went back to school and I had really good grades and I was disproving everyone wrong in a way where they were saying like, you're never going to be able to do school in the same way. And I just proved everyone wrong. I did the best. I was one of the best students. I did really well, which for me was a sense of pride and a sense of don't tell me what I'm going to do with my life. Because it was really like the narrative also from my parents. It's different ways. Life's never going to be the same. You're never going to be the same. And you always need special treatment and very low stress. But it was nice for me to start to gain some success I started to find myself again. And I think I had some good experience in school with some good friends and some connective kind of friends. And then again, that seeking for more came in. And I still had to sometimes go to therapy visits. I started to have a therapist actually as a result. And that was a really beautiful experience for me. I had a really caring, supportive therapist that really helped me a lot go through that time where I was, because after that, hope psychosis, I went through bouts of depression and moments of really dark, feeling very dark in myself and very lost and feeling very sad and depressed. And it was
Do you
heavy.
think was it a depression that brought on the psychosis?
No, it was maybe as it started to come about. I think there were I still remember, I think there were these states of like very low lows and
Yeah.
very high highs, almost like this
Okay.
manic kind of thing. But after all of that and integrating that, I went through some bouts of feeling in a lot of pain and moments in depression. And my therapist really helped me through a lot. He was always there for me. Was talking a lot about our relationship with my parents and just processing everything within me. Having someone to talk to, a safe space. Never had that before. Being
Yeah.
heard, being fully heard in your experience.
What was the worst thing about being in the institution?
It's hard to say because it sounds like so bad, but there was actually times where I was kind of happy because I was almost like my life was so miserable. It was almost like I'm getting a vacation from my life and I'm getting to be with these guards that like care about me, give me like in some way really care and then they're there for you. They're like your guardian angels, so to say. So in some ways it was actually very positive, but obviously the beginning was very hard, not having these gaps in my memory, having these gaps in thinking, not knowing what was going on, having these, especially when I got in, these things of being followed,
Yeah.
phony, that was very hard. That was very intense because it felt so real. Like I wasn't even a consideration that it wasn't true. Like an awareness that it wasn't true because it just felt my thought that was just felt so real. And my thoughts were almost like when all that happened was like they were seeing all the evidence and they were creating a reality in my mind. Like that was the true reality. And like that is what's happening. There was such a deep conviction of it. Like even if everyone was telling me like my mom, that's not happening. It's like such a deep conviction. Like, no, it's happening, which is
How did you get out of that?
to be honest, I didn't do anything about it. It just faded. And I think with these episodes, I think that's what psychologists say. They come and fade and you get back to your normal a little bit. But then they can come again and they can come again. And a lot of people, they're very mentally unstable. They keep having these episodes. For me, fortunately, I feel like there was only this one big time and big episode, but often afterwards, I had this fear for different times. Whenever I felt like this was maybe being a little bit triggered, I had a lot of anxiety that like I was going back to there, or when I would have different ways of maybe thinking strangely, I would freak out and I would call my dad or something. And I was like, my God, am I going to go back? That was a huge fear for me to go back because it was so traumatic. But I think at some point I really started to learn to regulate myself. Or even when I felt like it was coming back, it was almost like a part of my consciousness could really hold space for that part of me that felt so shaky and guide me back to, okay, gonna be okay. Go back. It's like a form of consciousness awakening in me in that. Yeah, it was a tough time, sure. But
Yes,
I'm
it
grateful
sounds
for
very challenging.
I'm grateful for it now, Mitzi, because
Yeah.
it was the beginning of my spiritual awakening. I wouldn't be who I am today with all of the depth that I've cultivated myself, I believe, and the spiritual connection. If there wasn't something that would have woken me up from where I was, it was like a wake up call in
Yeah.
a way.
And I've heard that before. I've heard stories who've gone through similar episodes and it has been the catalyst for a spiritual awakening and they've
Yeah.
become aware of gifts, maybe special gifts that they have that can only be brought forth because of having that experience with the deep connection to their consciousness. So you came back from the experience, obviously changed, finished high school, and then what happened next?
Yeah. So I finished high school. I was actually doing really well again at that point, and I took a gap year. I didn't go to college yet. I accepted a good college, but I took a gap year and I went to South America to travel. So I traveled for a while and that was a beautiful experience for me. Ups and downs for sure, but just to see different places. I went to Brazil and to Argentina and Colombia, like all these like exotic kind of places. And that was one of my desires. I wanted to travel. I wanted to have a break from everything. I wanted to experience things. And so I connected with people. I had some friends, and it was a good time of my life, I would say, even though it had its ups and downs and feelings of loneliness and disconnection. But it was a pivotal time, like being able to embrace this adventure, even with everything I had just been through. I guess 3 years before, it was a big step, a big leap, but I felt I could do it. I was at a good place. Yeah, I met some cool people, and I was there from January, I think, to maybe July, so for 6 months. And then I started to prepare for college. I was going to college in Scotland, a very good college, and had a really couple of really good years until 2016. I was there for, I think, maybe 1.5 years or something, 1.5 semesters, or sorry, 3 semesters. And then that time was really amazing for me because I made a lot of friends. I was more outgoing. I found my personality. I had a lot of fun, like what you do in college a little
Yeah.
bit. You drink a lot of this, but it was the time of my life. It was fun and
Yeah.
it was good. And I was involved. I was good at school. I was involved in different things. The beautiful thing about that college was there were a lot of different things you could do, from tennis to different card games and everything. So I filled my life with a lot of things. It was very fun. But in 2016, I had my first real spiritual awakening. I remember in the summer of 2016, I went through again this deep kind of depression or feeling really low and bad. And I saw this advertisement for this spiritual event, like a community event of the spiritual teacher that I watched some videos from here and there because I started to be interested more in that stuff. I wasn't
Yeah.
fully believing it, but I started to be interested in it. And I saw this event was happening in the Czech Republic. And I was like, I was at such a low place and I just somehow felt like I really needed to go somewhere. I really just need to go. And so I still remember I went in the morning, I took a bus 6.5 hours. I still remember this morning I was on a bus and I somehow had this feeling like this is going to be really special. Something was in the air for me.
Yeah.
This is really powerful. I don't know. I didn't know what it was, but it was this elevated feeling of this is going to be amazing for me. And so I went there and I went to the retreat center, and it was like a community event, and they were holding different workshops and and 3 times a day, like different things and practices of self-expression, feeling your emotion, different things. And I've never experienced something like that. It was very different than anything I ever experienced. But it really changed my life. It was a pivotal moment where I really awakened, where I first had really deep spiritual experiences. And I remember there was this one moment where all the men were sitting in this tent and it was about self-expression. I remember you had to take this wooden stick, put it in the ground and just express from your power, just express your truth. And I remember I was really nervous, but I did that. And I started talking about myself and I started feeling this like channeled energy come through that also gave me so much like power. And I started sharing things and they had such power in them. And I'd never experienced something like that before. And it was a very confusing experience for me because it's like, what the hell is this? Like I'm suddenly feeling so much power flow through me in energy that I've never felt before in my life. And that was really powerful experience for me. And then I started to go through the retreat, and I had, and one time about emotional releases, I was just crying for like probably 10 minutes. Like I'd never cried before, maybe for the last 2 years, 3 years.
Mhm.
And then I started to really just awaken, I guess you could say. I was really feeling the reality of spirit. I was really feeling the reality of there's a deeper spiritual reality at play here. And I started to understand that. And it was something that is not a concept, something that is not like, oh, I believe in this. It was a full body, like experiential knowing. There was nothing that could shake me. This is real. I remember this feeling. There's so much more to life than I thought. It was beautiful. It was amazing. And it was a little bit ungrounding for a while, for maybe 3 weeks, because I was on such a high. I felt like now my life is going to be a high, like for the rest of my life, which obviously we all know it doesn't like work like that. But it was beautiful to be acquainted to this sense of spiritual connection and to know that's real. And after that trip, I dropped out of college. I was there a few more weeks. No, sorry, I was there for another semester. And then I started to realize more and more, like somehow I just can't do this anymore. I don't want to study economics. I don't want to do that. And I started to connect with people that were life coaches, and I received some coaching, and somehow I started to put up a video on Facebook, and I started to share my truth, and I started to feel the passion of just sharing about things and my truth different ways. And I remember it being received quite well. And then it somehow, I was thinking back at it now, it's ballsy and a little bit maybe ungrounded that I just dropped out of college and I was like, I'm going to become a life coach now. But I'm just going to follow my dream. And I was like, I was in that mode. And so I did that. And my parents were not really happy that I was just suddenly dropping out of college. They couldn't understand it. I was sharing it with them the best I could, but nothing could stop pursuing this path somehow. And in the beginning, I moved to Prague, to the Czech Republic, because I had some friends there and place to stay. I didn't have much money at the time. And I started wanting to do coaching. In the beginning, it was very challenging for me because I was a beginner and I didn't know how to do this. I lacked self-esteem in different areas. I lacked belief in myself. But in the summer of 2017, I went to Sedona to like a spiritual retreat or meditation community that was living there. And I actually met my partner, which then became my wife. And yeah, so that was that experience. And then the last 5 years have been just deepening, I guess, in my spiritual gifts and going from really deep awakenings to grounding it back into my body and being grounded. And in life, for a while, I was very like in the ethers, not very grounded. So I needed to get a job for a while.
It's interesting the connection you have with certain places and how, like, your trip to Australia, your trip, like, you go on these pilgrimages.
Oh, that's
Now,
interesting.
you went to the Czech Republic and now Sedona, obviously a very spiritual place. What do you think that is all about in your spiritual journey, these touch points or these places?
Yeah, I definitely feel like there's purpose in going to these places on a spiritual level to have some experience that you're meant to have in that place. I think obviously Sedona is a very known like spiritual mecca. And I think that was very exciting to me to go here because it's like higher energy or the rocks emanate energy. And
Yeah. It's
obviously
beautiful.
all that stuff is real. And Sedona has been a place that I kept coming back to over the last 3, 4 years. We lived there last year over and over again when we went there. It's been a very deep place of connection and meaning for me. Nowadays I'm in a place where I went through this phase where I was like always seeking out all these like places and vortexes, but at some point I just let go of that a little bit and I just went wherever like my heart felt called to or where I felt called to in some way. And sometimes that was Sedona. And well, for a while, I was living in Illinois and in a place I didn't love so much, but it was just life put me there for a specific reason. I couldn't really get out. And so I think sometimes, Mitzi, it's like we're always at the right place at the right time. We're meant to be places and experience different things. And then we're meant to go somewhere else. And sometimes I think life is asking us to be more settled, to not constantly dance around from one place to the next, because it can be a little bit ungrounding. It was like for me for a while. But yeah, definitely looking back, I think there were definitely these places that were part of my journey.
And sometimes I think when we go through these experiences that are difficult, that we can discover our greatest teachers. So, who or what would you say has been your greatest teacher?
I think there have been several teachers for me in my life. Let me think about this for a moment. I think just life itself in some way for me has been my greatest teacher in the way that it always has given me what I needed to become aware of what I need to see. And I think nowadays there's a sense of trust that I have in life on some deeper level that everything's always happening on purpose and for a reason, and that nothing is a coincidence in some way. And then that everything is always, even if it's challenging times and times where you're not well in some way, it's always times that show you deeper and highlight what's still within you. And for me, the last few years, I went through this time from 2016 to 2017, 2018, maybe early, where I was a little bit on this like high, or a little bit on this living my dreams and going wherever I want to go. And it was a little bit this spirituality of this, I can have everything I want. And that was the phase of that time. But looking back at it now, it was very ungrounded, and it doesn't represent this deeper, more integrated, more balanced path of spirituality that I now stand for. But I needed to experience that just to awaken out of that is how life is meant to be. Life is not always meant to be this constant high. And I think after that, I went through 3 years of, I would call dark night of the soul, I guess you can call it, where it's like after all these highs, now I had to face off with everything within me that is still alive in me. And to be honest, in some ways I still do. There's still unhealed aspects of myself that I've only recently become aware of that need more attention, need more focus from me. I think sometimes, even over the last few years, I've been unaware how much the trauma of my past, especially with my childhood, but also with that psychological break, has really impacted me. And I think my biggest teacher has really been life in terms of how it humbles you, because I've had very deep spiritual experiences, and I've had experiences where I felt extremely empowered and extremely spiritually connected. And I was always like, I sometimes have had these experiences, and I would go back a little bit down to like normality, and I would feel so shitty that I wasn't able to live at that all the time. So I was always wanting to seek that. But life has been a constant humbling agent in a way of really letting me dive into what's here and what's real, and not seek these experiences, but seek groundedness and seek realness and authenticity. And the theme that I'm learning right now, it's hard for me sometimes to balance, is the balance of when a lot of people that are always like, when I want something, they want to achieve it. And they say it's just the beliefs in the way, and I change the beliefs. What I'm always learning more is like the balance of capacity and what you're capable of, and actually the humility of saying, right now, I just can't do this. Or right now, with everything that's still in me, I'm not able to receive this. And just that, to have that humility of being honest with that, has been a lesson for me, I think, because there's been a part of me that's been for years in some ways, always trying to be at such a high level. And there's this pressure that's come from that. And that's been a pressure from childhood. But even on a spiritual level, this pressure to always be spiritually connected, to always be the highest spiritually speaking, wanting to live the highest path. And I think life has been so humbling in a way of, yes, all of that is real, but your humanity, your heart,
You
your
have to keep coming back.
vulnerability. Yeah, that's real. And I think I've had to face off with that, and over being surrendered after trying to become more, being surrendered back into, okay, this is where you are right now. And that's okay. And it's given me a deep level of, I think, in the work that I do with clients as well, a deep level of intuitive clarity, of integrative transformation. I like to call it a transformation that's integrated and balanced, right? Not so everything you want, we're going to do that now, but it's what is truly grounding to your system. What are you truly needing right now? What honors your heart and your vulnerability, as well as your potential and your capacity and your ambition? What honors both. And I think that's an important balance to learn. I'm still learning, but that's been one of my greatest teachers, life itself, humbling me over and over again.
Yeah, it
Still,
has a way of doing that, doesn't it?
sure. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I'm just curious about some practical things that you can share with people who might be looking to regulate their nervous systems or attain more of that balance or calm. Like, what's something practical that people can do?
Like, sure. Yeah. One of the great ways, and this is not a secret or something special, but is our breath, right? I like to breathe deeply into my belly and feel my feet on the ground, which is that connection to our feet, of being grounded. Immediately being aware of that brings us out of our mind. It's like when we are aware of our feet and we're aware of our breathing and we have our awareness there, then we can't be so lost and our minds thinking that convinces us of all these perceptions and storylines and narratives, right? So it's a way to ground ourselves in a way, right? Breathing deeply and slowly is a great practice. And there are different breath works or ways you can research that. For example, a breath where you breathe in for 4 seconds, breathe out for 8 seconds, that help regulate the nervous system. So that's when it comes to the nervous system. And I think when it comes to being present and really grounded and present, I like to ask the question, what if nothing could be different, right? Because our mind is always seeking often for new, for different, for more. Our mind is always seeking for more. And so when we ask this hypothetical question, what if nothing could be different right now? We open up to just being with what is and bringing all of our presence here, right? Our presence into our senses, our presence into our feeling, presence into everything. If we surrender in some way that something could be different and we are here to figure out how that different is meant to come about, that drops us in deeper into this moment. It's something that I like to do with myself. What if nothing could be different right now? And even if I'm experiencing things that I'm not liking, I'm not enjoying myself right now. It's what if nothing could be different right now? What if I just surrendered to that experience?
Mm.
And what opens up usually is this deeper presence. And from that presence, then there's more stillness. And from that stillness, there's more access to this clarity then that we can be guided by. That is not a clarity of I'm the one figuring out my life, but it's a clarity of coming from something deeper. This is your path. This is where you're meant to go. And we can follow that more because we're allowing ourselves to be more surrendered and more present. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it's
Sense.
funny because you're answering questions that I had in my mind, just naturally answering, but I think that's you're explaining how people can get in touch with their calling, who may have questions about their purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great question. And I think through presence, I think for me has been a lot listening deeply, but more and more kind of always letting go. When there's a part of us that really tries hard to figure something out, that's often
Mhm.
more ego, and the part of
Yeah.
us that kind of in a little bit of a fight or flight response and really need to figure it out, right? That's not usually our intuitive guidance, right? My intuitive guide is coming from a place of stillness, and we open up, and it comes without us. It comes when we stop seeking so much for it, we stop grasping
Yeah.
some. And one thing that a spiritually mature seeker really needs to learn is to be okay when there is no answer. And then I think that's where a lot of people struggle
Mm.
with. It's like they always seek for purpose, for guidance, for being guided. But when the universe is still, when the universe is not saying anything, when there's nothing coming through, people think, oh my God, I'm not doing this right. I'm not open to my intuition. Where in reality, it's the universe actually just saying, so become more familiar with not knowing. And
Mhm.
I will keep not giving you guidance until you keep feeling safer and not knowing. And then I will open up guidance the moment it's meant to be. But I think that's what a mature spiritual seeker is going to learn over time, is that safety in not knowing, and that we can trust that. And that when we don't know, then we don't need to know. And when we need to know, we will know.
I love that. That is magical.
Yeah.
That's very powerful.
Thank you. Yeah.
I love it.
It's hard to embody and implement and all the time, but it's a good insight to have.
It is, and if you have an awareness of it and you can at least touch on that, you can develop that ability. I
Okay.
love it. So what would
Yeah.
you say are the biggest lessons that you've learned in the course of your life?
Again, staying humble, trusting life, knowing that I'm not in control of all of this and that there's something deeper going on, and that my job is mainly to hold space for whatever is arising in me, and to hold space and to be present with what's coming through me, and to embrace all the different wounded parts within me that come up, but to know that I am not the one in control of this. And I think that's been one of my deepest lessons, over and over, gets taught over and over again. Because obviously there's a part of us sometimes that keeps wanting to take control. I want to do this. I want to decide. I want to choose. And sure, to a certain degree we can choose, but always in alignment with our deeper consciousnesses. That's the way to go. And another lesson I've learned, I think, that I'm still learning, is that it's not always about me. I think it's a big lesson. I think sometimes when we go through a lot of trauma, we build these beliefs of inferiority and maybe not being worthy, not good enough. Sometimes there can be the sense of it's always about us in some way, or when someone else is upset or when someone else going through, it's like, it's our fault or we did something wrong. And that's something really deep that I'm still healing and going through, is that sense that sometimes when we can truly root in our presence and we can be more in a space, it's not about me, but witnessing what's going on around us in a deeper way, being more present with that, letting that feeling of maybe that activates us and making it all about ourselves to just settle and being in a space of just witnessing what's around us, witnessing what's going on in other people, we can become way more present and actually connected to all the environment that we're connected with. I think a lot of us, we tend to make it about us and everything's about us. And when something goes wrong, it's our fault. And when life isn't going the way we want, it's on us. And that is a sense of, it's just what I've realized, it's just not the deepest truth. And not to say that there is things to become aware of and to know when we make mistakes and to make changes for sure. But I think that self blame and that kind of always focusing on like us, it's me, my fault, this, it's something that has been really rooted in me from my child, but it's something I'm awakening out of. And it's been a lesson for me for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. And what about the blessings of your life? What would you say are your biggest points of gratitude?
I'm grateful for my spouse in a way where she's really brought me in touch with what I needed to see and the different aspects where I haven't been fully in touch with and bringing me back to humility and bringing me back to actually focusing on the things that truly matter and that are important. Yeah, I'm very grateful for that, even though sometimes we can be grateful for something that's also challenging, but it's ultimately for our highest best, even though in moments we might fight that. I'm also grateful for my spiritual gifts and the fact that I get to offer my gifts as a service to people and to serve people. And I feel so enlivened when I do that in many ways. And I feel always there's such a deep, sacred communion that happens in a sacred healing in that. And I'm so grateful that life chose me as a conduit for this kind of work, for this deep work. And I'm grateful that in some way I was chosen to deliver these messages that I think can be very grounding and healing for people. And I'm grateful that that was the gift that was given to me because I enjoyed it, connects me to the deepest passion of my life, which is my spirituality in a way. And I get to do that for a living. And I'm grateful that it seems like life always has my back when it comes to that. And I'm grateful that I get to do something that I love and that I enjoy and where I feel like I don't have to work hours and hours, but I can go in my own rhythm in life. I can take a break whenever I need to. And somehow I'm grateful that life always provides for me that in this way. I'm grateful for that. And it wasn't always as in life is given. I'm grateful for the lessons life has given me to get to this point I am today. But I'm grateful that now I feel stable and grounded and rooted in this, in my own work and in my ability and in my clarity of what I'm here to do and how I'm here to serve people. That's something I'm grateful for. To have
Yeah,
been.
it's beautiful. And one last question. What is the most important thing?
For me, or just as a
It,
general, like what is the most important thing?
whatever way you want to interpret the question.
What is the most important thing? I think the most important thing is to build a deeply connective, honoring, and appreciative and acknowledging relationship with ourselves because we are the one that cannot escape this experience, no matter, yeah, we are in this body, we're in this person that we are, we're living as this person that we are, even though from my spiritual experience, there's something deeper within all of that. But I think the most important thing is to build a relationship with yourself where you can like yourself and you can appreciate yourself and you can see your own value, right? And to bring healing to those parts of you that don't see their own value, that feel worthless and holds. That's also a connective relationship. What I mean by that is holding space and not pushing away any parts in us or rejecting any parts, even the ones that feel like they're in the way that we feel like we don't like, but really building the capacity and holding space for all the different parts within ourselves to bring integration to them, to bring deeper acceptance to them and have all parts of our beings feel appreciated in some way for the role they play and just coming to this deep feeling of harmony, integration, and inner peace. For me, that's the most important thing in life because from that place as well, when we are going to have a positive impact on others daily, where we're going to truly be able to be there for people when they need
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
which is a
Because
journey in itself.
it
But yeah,
is. But just like you were saying earlier with your experiences with the bully hurt people, and healed people heal
Sure.
people.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. See,
Well,
thank you so
oh,
much for
thank
this.
you. So wonderful. I really
Mm,
appreciate all the time you've spent today, and you've just shared so many wonderful things that I know are going to resonate.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For anyone listening to this, thank you for spending your precious lifetime witnessing me in my experience. And I hope you can gather something nice for your heart from this, can relate to this. Yeah, I send you many blessings and much love. Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful.
You're wonderful, Henry. Thank you so much.